It's Father's Day. And so I got to think of, what do you say to somebody on Father's Day? Well, it tells us in the Ten Commandments that we are to honor our fathers and mothers. So our days on earth will be long, but I mean, that's a commandment to honor our fathers. So today, we're obeying the commandment of God in a way, because it's Father's Day. We set a day aside just specifically to honor our fathers. And when you think about it, being a father is one of the first things God told Adam. Remember that? He said, God said to Adam, he said, be fruitful and multiply. In other words, he wants him to be a father. Now, a lot of you don't know me all that well, but I spent 40 years in construction. I was a commercial electrician. And the scariest thing I've ever done is be a father. When you're holding one of these little ones and it's hurting, or it's sick, or something really wrong with it, and you can't fix it, that's the scariest I've ever been. Being a father was probably the biggest, most difficult, best, rewarding job I've ever had. Judy and I have a blended family. We have 5 children. So we can tell you that each child is different from the womb. There's no two alike. Each time you think you got something figured out, you don't. So, as I was thinking about what would you say on Father's Day, and so you say, well, what did God say? Okay. My question to you is, why did God choose Joseph to be the father of Jesus here on earth? Did you ever think about that? Here's Joseph. Okay, would that have been who perhaps you would have chose? Would you have thought of this? And Joseph, we would say, is a blue-collar worker. Okay, and so, because I was a blue-collar worker, that's okay. But the scriptures tell us he was a carpenter. But when we looked that word up that they used to say carpenter, it could also mean stonemason, okay, just to clarify it. But I'm going with the wood carpenter. That's me. But I just wanted to throw that out for in case anybody needed to know that. And so think about it. Here he is, a common everyday worker kind of guy, and Jesus chose this guy. He didn't choose the rabbi. He didn't choose the banker. He didn't choose the politician. He chose the worker bee. He chose this regular fellow to raise his son. Okay, well, you think, well, wow, what an awesome responsibility. And let's see if we can because the Bible honestly doesn't tell us very much about Joseph. But so I'm going to read between the lines. And so it's not going to be in your Bible quite like this, but you can see where it comes from. But if you don't go, that's fine. I mean, this is my story, the way I interpret it, because like I say, it's not spelled out too well. Okay. We first run into Joseph in Matthew 2. And it says that Joseph is a just man. And if we look up that just man, he's a righteous man. He's a man that's right with God, is what they're trying to say there. Okay? And we go on right there in Matthew 2, when we first read about Joseph, he's having the worst day of his life. I mean, his world has been turned upside down. He is hurting. He has had a gut punch like no other. He's engaged to this pretty girl named Mary, and she's been gone for 3 months, and she's come back, and she's pregnant. And so he's, so here, what does it say Joseph is doing here at this junction in his life when this all has happened to him? Is he saying, well, I'm going to do this? He's trying to figure out what's the best thing to do for Mary and her family. He's trying to decide what is the best thing to do for Mary and her family, not what's the best thing to do for Joseph. Even though I know he's hurting and things like that. But that's the kind of guy Joseph is. He's not looking at himself. He's trying to see how others are. And then it says, it says, then the angel appeared in a vision. Now the inspired version says, the angel appeared in a vision, but other versions, other translations will say, an angel appeared in a dream. I'm going with inspired here because I like visions, and to me more powerful than dreams. But anyway, it says the angel. When it says the angel, it lets you, it makes me think that he had an ongoing relationship with this angel. Because he didn't say a angel, he said the angel, just like if you use the same plumber all the time, and you make a reference to him, you say the plumber. But if you're just going to call somebody out of the phone book, you're going to say a plumber. And so he's saying the angel appeared. So I'm saying that Joseph has a relationship with God. He's able to communicate with God. We're looking at why God chose Joseph. See, I'm pointing out some things that like I told you early on, I'm going to twist it a little bit because it doesn't really tell us anything. But some say, and I'm not inclined to go along with it, that this angel's name was Gabriel, but it doesn't tell us that. But Gabriel is the one that appeared to Mary, and Mary calls him the angel also. So, and then it tells us the very next thing that happens when the vision's over, Joseph gets up. He goes, because the angel tells him to take Mary home to his wife, be his wife. And that's exactly what he did. He stepped right then. He got up, went and got Mary, took her to his house. And they didn't have relations or anything, but she was there. She was his wife from then on. She never, Joseph was with her. And we just sung that song, Trust and Obey, where there's no other way. And that's exactly what you see Joseph doing here. The angel said, do this. He may have had reservations. He didn't say anything. He got up and did it. Just like that. And then, the next time we run into Joseph, we got to skip back and forth between Matthew and Luke here, because they each tell a little different stories in this particular part of the Bible about and we're in Luke now, Luke 2, and we find Joseph and Mary in Bethlehem, and we all remember Luke's story about the birth of Christ, and he says he was born in a manger. Now, he doesn't say anything about being born in a barn or grotto or any of those kind of things. He was born in a manger. And that's probably why the angel went to the shepherds, because they would know where the manger was. And anyway, that's just me. But anyway, Joseph and tells us that when Christ was 8 days old, they circumcised him and gave him the name that the angel said. They called him Jesus. And then we find him in 40 days after Christ's birth at Mary's purification. And tells about they gave him the turtle doves for sacrifice for Mary. And that tells us that Joseph's income was somewhat modest. Because had he been better well-to-do, he would have gave a lamb. But because he was not so affluent, he gave 2 turtle doves to take care of the things that the priest had to take care of. And at that same time, there's something they do where they dedicate the oldest child that's born, and because God said in Numbers 3:11 that all firstborn are mine, and then he then makes a trade and takes the tribe of Levi, but originally he says all firstborn are mine. And so I think there's something that they do at the temple or did in those days for that. Anyway, then we go back to Matthew and we run into the wise men. Remember the story of the wise men come and we got Herod questioning him and wanted to find out where the baby is. And so anyway, it says that angel, after the wise men leave, the angel of the Lord came in a vision and tells Joseph to take the baby and his mother and go to Egypt. Joseph gets up in the middle of the night, right after this vision, packs him up, and takes him to Egypt. Just like the angel told him to do. And the angel also says, now you wait there till I come tell you to come back. But here again is how obedient Joseph is, because he gets up in the middle of the night and loads it, takes him off to Egypt. Now, I thought about that, and I think, well, wouldn't you want to tell somebody, you want to watch the shop, I got this customer over here, could you take care of this? Maybe you got some livestock. No, he just gets up in the middle of the night and goes, and that way, if Herod had sent, let's say Herod had sent somebody to watch those wise men. But he didn't trust them. Watch them, see where they go. I'm not saying, it doesn't say he did that. It doesn't, but he could have done that. And so, this way, by Joseph leaving in the middle of the night, if anybody comes and asks his neighbors or anybody, his friends, where'd he go? I don't know, he was here one day. He's gone the next. That's all I can tell you. And that's all they could say. That's all they know. But had he stayed and a couple of days and made arrangements, it wouldn't work out, you see? But because he trusts and obeyed. And of course, then an angel came and to him in Egypt and told him to go back to Israel, and he did. And then the last time we see Joseph is when Jesus is 12 years old. Okay, and the way the story goes, they said that they went to the Feast of the Passover every year in Jerusalem for 12 years. So they've done this 12 times that we know of. Okay, and Mary and Joseph and Jesus. And so they go impression that quite a group of them went from their hometown, and they all went together, probably friends, relatives, neighbors, and so kids will be playing with kids and all that. Well, so they go a day's journey back toward Nazareth, and so it's time for camp, and Mary and Joseph are going through the different camps or tents or what, looking for Jesus, and he's not there. And so they realize he must have not got out of Jerusalem. So now they go back to Jerusalem, and then they finally find him. It says after 3 days. We've looked for 3 days. Now we don't know if they're counting the day that they went the first day or not. But anyway, it's been a number of days since they see Jesus, and Jesus, when they confront him, he says, well, you should have known that would have been about my Father's business. But, and it says here, when you read that they were all amazed at his understanding and his questions, his answers, the things he was saying. All these learned people in the temple that were sitting around him were amazed. Now he's 12 years old, and the next year he's going to be 13. And at 13 in the Jewish religion, and then I'm not acquainted that much with it, but I know it's a plateau, and then you go into church with the men and different things, but I'm not sure what all it entails. But I know I could just see a 12-year-old wanting to know what lies in store, what's down the road. Anyway, he's there, and everybody is amazed. And another thing I want to say is, I believe that some of that understanding that amazed all these guys came from Joseph. God didn't choose Joseph just because he looked good. I mean, I think Joseph had a walk with God like something else, and that's why God chose him. And I think Jesus learned a lot from Joseph in this way. But and you ask yourself, well, how could you leave a 12-year-old and get down the road and not know you didn't have your kid with you? Well, it happened to me. So I'm gonna. Now you can say this is an excuse, but I'll tell you the story how this can happen. I'm going to say it was 1982. Now I told you we had a blended family. Okay, the ages in 1982 would have been 6 to 12, the oldest being 12. Now we have 4 girls and 1 boy. In 1982 on Christmas Day, about 10 o'clock, my wife's sister and her husband called up and said, let's go to Florida to Disney World. And so we said, why not? So in 2 hours, we had the kids in the car. Now, one of the first things we did when we got married was buy a big van. We've always had a big van. And in those days, we buy these vans, and they had the 2 bucket seats in front, and then they had 2 bench seats. And I made a platform that went behind the back seat, and my wife found this really cool foam pad that covered. We had that whole thing was a bed, and so those kids, we could travel, and they go to sleep. They have all the room in the world, kick around, and it was wonderful for us. I know it worked for you, but it did for us. So the plan was my wife's sister and her husband and their 3 kids lived in Arkansas. Well, I'm saying Arkansas. Actually, they have lived there, but sometimes they live in Missouri and sometimes they live in Arkansas. They're never more than 20 miles distance, but sometimes it's in Missouri and sometimes I'm thinking we're going to say Arkansas. Anyway, we went down and picked them up, spent the night there, and took off for Florida. Well, along the road, now I want to paint this picture a little brighter. We have these 8 kids now, and their kids 8 kids that are range in age from 12 to 6. Now, to be clear about this, the 12-year-old, size-wise, is in the middle of the pack. There are several that are bigger than she is, okay? So they're all not that big. And of the 8 kids, 7 of them are blonde. Only have one that has dark hair. Okay, just remember all those facts. And so on the way down, we stop at a service station, and with this many girls, it takes a while at the service station. So I'm naturally taking care of the car, getting the gas, doing the things you do, and so in our great wisdom, we paired them up and said, okay, you've got a partner, so you always have to be with your partner. And we tried to put some of the olders with some of the youngers. I think we had this down, okay? So we stopped at this service station, and we get back in the car, and I look back there, of course, the whole back of the van is liquid, it's moving, okay? And I say, is everybody here? And they say, yes. Has everybody got their partner? Yes. So we take off. And then somebody notices a couple of them running down the street. So it can happen. It does. And if they had, we could have gone several miles before we noticed the 2 entities. And it was the 2 noisiest ones. But still, we got away without them. Okay, now, another story in the Bible. Now, you've all heard the story of the prodigal son. But I think that story is perhaps named wrong. When I look at it, I think it should be the story of a loving father. And it is about how God the Father is, and it deals with repentance and stuff like that. It really does. But we all know this story, and like I say, I'm not telling any stories you guys haven't read, probably a lot more than I have. But when we look at this story, we see the younger son goes to the father and says, hey, I would like my share of the estate. I want, what's coming to me now. And this is something that was really unusual at the time as well, then as now. But the father decides to grant his wish. And I can't tell you what the estate was. I can only surmise that there was probably livestock involved. There may have been servants. There may have been all kinds of stuff that went with his share of the estate. I don't know. But it says that not many days later, he takes his stuff and leaves. And it actually, it was quite a deal. Whatever it was, he left. And of course, the story goes on where he makes some bad choices and ends up, I don't know how long a time it is. It doesn't really say. But sometime later, he finds out that he's got nothing left. He's went through the whole whatever it was. And he's got nothing left. And he's in a foreign country. And he can't get anybody to give him a job. He can't do anything. And finally, the only thing he can do is get a job feeding the swine and the hogs. And for a Jew, that's just terrible. That's about as low as you can go. And he's so hungry, he's wanting to eat what the pigs eat. And so he finally comes to himself and says, well, I'd be so much better off at home with Dad. Well, even if I just took a job with Dad, he treats everybody so much better than this. So he decides to go home. But here we go. Now the father, it says, sees him a a long way off. So I'm the kind of person that gets a picture in your mind. And my picture is, okay, Dad's got his house up here on a hill, and not a big hill, but a little hill. And you get it, to come off the main road and come up a path to Dad's house, you have to cross this creek. It doesn't say any of this. But he looks out over that, because there's only one way out. And he looks off, quite often, looks that direction, because it says he sees him coming from a long way off. Because I think in his heart, he was looking for him. And what's he do? This kid that's did this, what does Dad do? Because he takes off running. It says he takes off running down to that kid. And he grabs that kid and kisses him and loves on him. And he hollers at the servant, "Hey, Fred, bring me the best robe. Not just any robe, the best robe." Now, I don't know what the best robe consisted of, but the dad wants to give him the best. And he says, put a ring on his finger and shoes on his foot, on his feet. And then he said, kill the fatted calf. Okay, now, Aaron, I have a question for you. And this is a real question because I know you know more about this than I do. Okay, whoever got the answers. But what I want to know is, if you were to raise a calf to the optimum butchery weight, what would that weight be?
Well, if it's grain fed, about 1,400 or 1,500 pounds.
Whoa, wow, 1,400 or 1,500 pounds. Well, I'm not going to push it that hard. I have, but what I'm trying to point out to you, this calf, okay, when he said the fatted calves, she's saying hers would be about 1,500 pounds, but I'm just going to say 800 pounds, just for the sake of my story, because it's getting, okay, now, when you butcher a calf like that, you figure on about 50% waste, right? Hide, hooves, I'm just, something like that. Something like that. Okay. Now what I'm trying to show you here is when he says, you grab the fattest calf, you've got at least 400 pounds of meat. Right? Everybody's okay with that? So he's given up. So you got to understand, in those days, refrigeration wasn't what it is today. And so if you got 400 pounds of meat, you got to have help eating it. So he had a party, okay? And so I'm saying he invited everybody he knew, the neighbors, anybody that could come by, and they had music, it says, they had dancing. And so here he is, the host of this party, and I'm going to say there's over 100 people here, okay? This is my story. You tell it? It's okay. But can you see where I'm going to this? I mean, you know, just by what
Did he think
we
you
do
were
know.
going to tell a story?
And so, and when Christ is telling this story in his day, these people would have seen something like this. You know, we don't think about this, but they would have. And so, the older son, here's this party going on, and he comes in from the field. And he asks the servant what's going on. And he says, oh, your brother come home, and your dad's killed the fatted calf. Well, now the older boy is hurt. He feels bad. And he won't even come into the party. Now, it doesn't say where he is, but he's not at the party. You know, so I'm going to put him in the barn. Okay? He's sitting in the barn sobbing. Okay? Lord's Ark, having a pity party. And so, when the dad hears about it, here's the dad. He's the host of all these people, all this going on. He leaves that party and goes out and sits with that son that's hurting in the barn and tries to talk to him. Now, you notice that the son that's in the barn says, Dad, you never even killed a goat for me, because I wouldn't have made near as big a party. But, I mean, that's how they determined the size of the party, by what animal they were going to use to feed. I'm just pointing out a few things. But you see how that father, how great a father he was to leave all that was going on and go out and sit with his son and try to encourage him and get him to see that, try to explain to him, the party is not, it's because your brother was gone. He was lost. He was dead. And now he's here with us. Okay? And that's what the party's about. He's come back. And anyway, try to get the other brother to not feel like he's not loved or he's not the favorite or all that. He has to. But he did it. And that's pretty, to me, pretty neat. Now, after I was looking at this, now this story, like I say, we call it prodigal son, but like I say, it could be the loving father. You can help but wonder how much Joseph's influence had on Jesus for Jesus to tell this story. I don't know, but you can't help but wonder that. And now, when I'm looking at this stuff, when I'm thinking of, my father. Now, I know most of you have never met my father. So I'll just tell you a few things about my father. My father did not go to church. But my father was like a lot of your fathers. He was in World War II. Now, he was a half-track driver. He was in 5 major battles. He had 5 Bronze Stars, a Bronze Star Medal, a Silver Star, got wounded 2 or 3 times, had 3 half-tracks shot out from under him, and he did all that and never fired a shot. Now, if you ask him about it, now, personally, he would never tell you any of that. He never said a word about it. I didn't even know about it till years later. But when you ask him about it, why he didn't fire a shot, he said, well, if you shot your gun, you had to clean it. That was his answer. So, he was a very humble person. He was happy. He was content. He was not a nervous person. He never put down to you. You never heard him hollering about things like that. So, and like I say, he never went to church, but he would always take me. If I wanted to go to church, he would take me. Or make sure I got away to church. And I often went to church. I was a convert to this church, but as a child I went to different churches, and I always enjoyed going to church. But anyway, so when I think about my dad, I would say my father didn't tell me how to live. He lived, and let me watch him do it. Now, I want to pass on a word of wisdom to all you fathers. Your child never will grow too old to hear you say, I love you. And I'll leave you with one verse 2 Corinthians 6:8, it says, and will be a father unto you, and ye shall be my sons and daughters, saith the Lord Almighty. So God is saying He's a father unto us. So we are so blessed.